Well, hello, sports fans. This is your favorite program, Athletics Chat number 63. And our buddy Stuart Weir is back home in Oxford, England, the intellectual capital of the world. And he has a new granddaughter, too. What a great way to go home. Congratulations, my friend.
Thank you.
And we've got so for all the world to hear, do you want to say what your granddaughter's name is?
Her name is Lexi, and she's 1 week
sweet.
old.
Oh my gosh! And how many grandchildren is that, Stu?
I have three, 2 boys and 1 girl.
Wow, you are now. Are they all as charming as you, or does it take a while to get that?
Well, I mean, how could they be? But yes, I think they are. I think they're more charming than me by a long way.
Well, congratulations! I'm very happy for you.
Thank you.
So we've got a plethora of topics tonight. First of all, glad to see you're back in your homeland. How was the trip back from Tokyo?
My flight out to Tokyo was wonderful, with about 40 people on a plane holding 300. If the plane back held 300, there were probably about 320 on it, because it was packed to the rafters. But what was really nice was at least 25 of the British athletics team were on the flight. So I had a chance to chat to a number of them in the airport before, or in the airport when we landed, or even 1 or 2 on the plane. So that was nice.
That's great. That's great. Okay. So we're going to start with the tough questions. What was the biggest surprise for you in Tokyo at the Olympics?
Just before I answer that, I want to throw a few statistics at you. Apparently, there were 83 countries represented in the finals, 43 countries winning medals, 3 world records, 12 Olympic records, 28 area records, and 151 national records. So, pretty high standard.
Yeah, that's impressive.
I am going to go for the biggest surprise is Italy. Not only did Lamont Jacobs win the men's 100, and of course Jamaica or America always win it, he then brought Italy home in the 4x1.
Yes, he did.
That is something I don't think any of us would have predicted either of those. So that was a real surprise.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. I thought that, I do enjoy seeing the U.S. win medals, but I also I see myself as a global villager a little bit. And I like seeing that. Like, I remember when Venusti Niangambo won the first medal for Burundi, and how proud he was back in '95. And he just was beside himself. And you could see, to me, that moment with Jacobs and Gianmarco Tambiri jumping up and hugging each other was worth the entire, Olympics. And it was just a beautiful moment. And I go along with that surprise. I mean, I thought that was, I think that was huge. What was the biggest moment for you?
I mean, that is a really hard one because there were so many. But a little bit like the Oscars, you can't give 2 awards to the same person, so you can sort of work out who's going to get what. And I mean, I'm actually staying with Italy. I'm going to go for the men's high jump for Muta Borshin and Gianfranco Tambieri. The way that they decided that rather than have a jump off when they had both jumped 2:37, that they would actually ask the officials, can we just call it a day and each have a gold medal? And that was just a lovely sporting gesture, something which I think de Coubertin would have approved of.
I agree. Go ahead.
I just want to say that I know that you're American, and the American psyche doesn't like a draw or a tie. Didn't somebody say a draw is like kissing your sister? But, you know, where I come from, particularly in cricket, you know, for an inferior team to avoid defeat is an honourable result. And for those two to say, well, look, actually, tonight, neither of us was better than the other. So let's just accept that we were equal. I thought that was a lovely gesture. And actually, I'm still hoping to write something about that. I haven't got around to it yet.
Wonderful.
Because I just think the way that they did it somehow took us out of the winner-take-all mentality. The two people saying, you know, that was a great contest. I really enjoyed going head-to-head with you. And I don't think either of us should have lost.
You know, the thing that I thought was missing from the global telecast, which is what I was watching, and we had British announcers, Canadian announcers, an Australian and one American, was that no one brought up that Mataz, this is his third medal in the Olympic high jump. And I think in telling that story, and we are storytellers, it was a wonderful addition to what happened last year or 2 years ago in Doha, where he had all 48,000 people in the stadium screaming for him.
Yeah.
And for me, that was particularly a moment because I was laying in bed with a terrible stomach ache. I'd eaten something weird, and I listened to the IAAF radio, which was glorious, and they caught the moment, and it was the entire evening was phenomenal. And to listen to it by radio really brought me back to listening to American baseball and like ice hockey. Like I refuse to watch ice hockey on TV. I have to listen to it on the radio. But I think that moment, what it did was, and yeah, there's this American thing about, you know, winning and stuff, but, you know, anybody that was in running in the 70s, you remember Frank Shorter and Jack Batchelor, and it's several AAU champs, they would tie just to piss off the officials. And, but also because they had run, you know, the last 365 days twice a day together, you know, and it was a show of respect. And I thought Tom Biari and Mutaz, it was just the perfect moment, and it was something that we needed as a global audience. So to add to that, okay, our next one, this is going to be the top. I think the next two are the toughest, my friend. Athlete of the meet. You're down to 6, you think?
Well, actually, I think for the men, I'm going to go for Karsten Warholm. Although, interestingly, you could make a case for another Norwegian, Jakob.
Yeah.
I just think that Karsten Warholm has dominated this event. But to break the world record, which has stood since, is it 92 Olympics?
92.
Yeah, Kevin Young. Yeah. To break that a couple of months back, and then to break it again in the Olympic final was quite phenomenal. And I mean, poor old Ray Benjamin actually ran faster than the old world record and still finished up second. And I mean, the thing about Warholm is that he seems to be able to produce a fast time when he wants to from whatever lane he's in. You know, the received wisdom is that if you're in lane 4 or 5 and you've got your main opponent next to you, that makes it easier. But I mean, we've seen Warholm do some phenomenal races in the outside lane with nobody in his sights, just going on. I mean, it's an interesting story because when he when he won the European Championship, we said, well, that was quite good, but he didn't have much opposition. Whitley comes across the world's top one. But as every opportunity, there in London 2017, he won the World Championship, but everybody said, well, you know, it was a weak field. There wasn't really anyone to challenge him. So don't read too much into it. But just every time we've said that, he just goes out and beats everybody around. And I mean, I think I'm right in saying that just for a bit of fun, he ran a 400 flat and so broke records in that as well. So I just think he's a phenomenal athlete. The times I have spoken to him, I've been really impressed with him. I remember at the Bislett, probably 2019, last time I was traveling there, he was on press duties, and there must have been a dozen people waiting for him, and I was 12th on the list. But he talked to me as if I was the only person on the planet, as if, you know, he really wanted to talk to me, rather than thinking, good grief, another bloke asking me the same questions that I've answered 12 times. And I just thought he was an impressive person, as well as an amazing hurdler.
Yeah, no, I think that I thought the Karsten was amazing. And I'm trying to think, there are people that are close. Jakob Ingebrigtsen, I think Joseph Cheptegei in the 5 and the 10. I thought the Mondo Duplantis, I thought also for a surprise, I think the only other one I can think of was Johannes Vetter, just absolutely bombing out. But for the athlete of the meet, Karsten Warholm, I think it is. What about for the female athlete of the meet?
Well, that I find actually more difficult. I had never seen, and I don't now. I've lost my confidence in how to say her name, because she made a point of saying people need to learn how to pronounce it. But can I say Ating Mu? Is that anything like?
I think
correct?
it's pretty close. I think it is. I think it is.
I mean, we had not seen her. I mean, we'd other than on TV, and she was the favorite going into the 800. But then she's 19, and it's an awful lot of pressure to put on someone. And she went out and won the race. Sydney McLaughlin, you know, you think about poor old Dalilah Muhammad, who broke the world record twice, and in Tokyo ran faster than either of her 2 world records, and she finishes second. To me, that put into context how good Sydney McLaughlin's performance was.
Mm-hmm.
But then I don't see how I can give it to anyone other than Elaine Thompson, who goes away with 3 gold medals. I know you can say that Ating Mu, well, because she then ran a relay as well, Ating Mu, running in the 4x4. But Elaine Thompson to win the 100 and the 200, and then guide to make it to the sprint relay. I mean, that was a phenomenal achievement. And to defend her 100 and 200 titles, some people would say this is the first time since Rio that she's been fully fit, because she's had so many injuries.
I think that I agree with you with Elaine. I recall in London seeing her with my binoculars in racing flats. I knew the Achilles were bad, but she never made an excuse. She never even winced. And I thought her performances in the 100 and the 200 were spectacular. And the 4x1 relay, especially after the U.S. men botched it so badly, just to appreciate what goes into handling the relay well. And I'm also going to point out something else. I think there has been a huge amount of sexism in the global approach to track and field this Olympics. And what I mean by that is our friends at the Wall Street, or no, the friends at the, it was the Wall Street Journal, broke a story, Rachel Berman, that the U.S. men's team was possibly not going to win a medal, an individual medal, in a men's running event for the first time. Now, Ryan, of course, we know, won the gold in the shot. There was a men's 4x4, obviously, and there was a plethora of medals, but that singular event, and I thought Rachel handled it quite well. The people who tried to cover it after that did it rather poorly, and a curious reader sent me a note and said, Larry, the U.S. women's team may have had the best performance they've had in a long, long time. Why aren't you writing about that? So I retweeted that. And then I went and looked at the British team. And my gosh, your British women's team, you know, you had Holly, you had Keeley, you know, you had the 4x4, you had the 4x1. You know, you had some fantastic performances. You had Laura Muir. My gosh, you know, that was just one of those moments we've been waiting for years. And so happy to see such a special person, you know, do it the old-fashioned way, earn it. But I do think that, and you know, you and I have talked about this before. I got to tell you that most of the time when I go to an Olympic or a global championship, there is much more competition and intrigue in the women's events than the men's events, you know? And it's just the nature of the sport and how fast women's sports is growing. And, you know, we've got, you know, this time we had athletes from 43 countries, as you said, win medals. That's pretty tremendous, you know? So it's just, you know, that was just my little 2 cents worth there. What about your deep thoughts on the meet? What kind of things, what did you learn? What did you observe? My biggest question is, how eerie was it to be in the stadium with no one else in there most of the time?
Well, I think stepping back, most of this year, we've discussed it so many times on this podcast. Most of this year, you and I were uncertain whether the Olympic Games would take place. And we were equally uncertain whether they should take place. And we were also both uncertain if they went ahead whether we would go. So to find that the Games did take place and that I went is a very positive thing. And I thought the Games were brilliant. I wasn't really aware of the lack of spectators. I mean, selfishly, you could say it was a lot easier to get out afterwards when there's no crowds fighting to get to the exits. I mean, I think it was very disappointing for the Japanese people to be told at the last minute that you can't actually attend. But I mean, other than poor old Sam Kendricks having to withdraw because of COVID, I am not aware of anyone else. And we did fear from the experience of the European indoors that this could be a super spreader type event. But so hats off to the Japanese and the IOC for doing it. Now, it wasn't an easy event to work at. To start with, getting there was an absolute nightmare in terms of the number of tests you had to have and the paperwork you had to have. when we arrived at the airport in Tokyo, it took us 1 hour and 50 minutes to get through the procedure to the point where somebody handed me an accreditation lanyard and stamped my passport saying I was allowed to enter Japan. And it was very restricted. I mean, I was there for 15 days. The first 3 and a bit days, I had to sit in my hotel room on my own, quarantining. And in the last 2 days, when the athletics was only on in the evening, there was nowhere I could go because you had to put in a plan listing all the places you wanted to go, and you couldn't change that. You couldn't add something on. We were not allowed to eat in any public restaurants or go in any public bars for the first 14 days we were there. So, you know, eating tended to be, for me, snacking in your room or eating something at the stadium. So all of that was a challenge. And I mean, actually today, I've been back for 2 days and I had to be tested again today to meet the UK requirements for having returned from Japan. So, you know, it was hard going in some ways. But I thought that the meet worked. I always felt safe. There were 1 or 2 situations where I was a little bit anxious, probably the plane home because it was full, and sometimes the mix zone where journalists meet athletes got a little bit crowded. And also it was very, very managed, so that an athlete only met one group of journalists and was about 3 meters away from them, possibly speak through a microphone. So you didn't have the kind of intimacy that I quite like. Sometimes you can go to a different part of the mix zone and just have a quick one-to-one with the athlete. That wasn't possible. I went into the village to meet a couple of athletes, and we could only meet 3 meters apart with a fence at a waist height between us. So that wasn't a very relaxed conversation. But there again, you have to say that the Japanese government had more than half their population consistently saying we don't want the games. And they made them happen, and they made them happen safely. So in a way, all those restrictions, you just have to say, were necessary, and you know they succeeded in putting on the games.
That's fantastic. You know, talk to me about the. So I was rereading that Rain piece that you did, and then I did a little research, and then I went back and pulled the broadcast, and there's an Australian field event coach who does announcing, John Tower perhaps, and he was talking about how all the rain went from the track into the middle of a field, so that the rings were filled up, and that's when we saw Valerie Allman fall in the second attempt. I thought the facility looked fantastic, and any comments about that?
Yeah, I mean, it is the 1991 World Championship Stadium, but it has been extensively rebuilt. I thought it was absolutely superb. I mean, I had a perfect view from any seat that I occupied. I mean, I thought the atmosphere was as good as it could be with you know, the music and the pretend crowd noises. And the weather was good apart from that one day. Now, there was some criticism for how they stopped the pole vault, but that they didn't stop the track races. And one of the races which was on was the women's 400 hurdles semi-final, where at least 2 athletes said afterwards, I couldn't actually see where the hurdles were because the rain was so strong into my face. And then in some of the lanes, more than in some others, there was actually water lying, so that you were actually almost wading through water. So there was perhaps a question to the technical officials, why did you think it wasn't safe to have the pole vault, but it was safe to have hurdles? But other than that, I mean, the weather was fine. Now, just one thing on the weather, though. You know, all the criticism of Doha being too hot and that we shouldn't have a world championship in somewhere as hot as Qatar, and then because of the air conditioning, it was all fine. You know, it was, I can only give it to you in centigrade, but it was up to 35 degrees centigrade in Tokyo, and with humidity that was horrendous.
Where you were starting at, Stu, was the heat in the stadium. You were comparing it to Doha.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was just saying that there's the complaints about giving the World Championship to Doha because of the heat. But in Doha, they had the air conditioning. But in Tokyo, I was much more conscious of heat and the humidity. I mean, one was constantly wiping. I was carrying a towel around with me. And of course, we were wearing a mask. And to wear a mask all day in that kind of heat was really quite demanding. So that was a challenge. And I mean, what happened was that an athlete would run without a mask, but then when they came into the mixed zone to do their interviews, they were handed a mask and expected to put it on.
Wow. Wow.
So that was certainly a challenge within the stadium. But I mean, I thought it was a magnificent stadium. I thought it worked well. I read an interesting post by Dan Pfaff where there's a claim that the new Mondo track might give a 2% advantage over more traditional tracks, and certainly the fast times in the 400 races raised that question, and it certainly seemed to be a fast track, but everything seemed to work well. So I have nothing but positive comments on the stadium.
So you were saying that the stadium was wonderful. The heat was, the humidity was a challenge. That's the way I felt it was in Osaka in 07, Beijing in 8, in Beijing in 15. But all I've heard was how difficult it was in Tokyo. What did you hear about Sapporo? Sapporo looked absolutely a nightmare for people running. I mean, 30 of the men marathoners dropped out.
Yeah, I mean, I think and the times of some of the really good runners. Yeah, I mean, I think that is an issue. And of course, you'll recall in Doha they did the marathons during the night.
Mm-hmm.
The marathons here started at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty frustrating if you're one of the world's top marathon runners, particularly if you're not from a hot country.
Yeah.
You know, to train for the marathon, to be capable of running a world-class time, and then to find the heat so oppressive and the humidity so oppressive that you're running 20 minutes slower than your normal timing. So, I mean, I think there are questions about that, that it doesn't seem to be fair, whatever fair means.
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, I thought in the women's marathon, Paris Jercher, I think she felt that Bridget Kosgei was having some trouble, and she really pushed it. And so everybody thought the world record holder because it was such a slow race that it was about the humidity. And Molly Seidel, the young American, what a brilliant race. That was really exciting.
Yeah,
on the men's side, I'm not sure anybody could have beat Kipchoge. And when Elisa de Sousa dropped out, I felt that any legitimate shot at challenging Kipchoge was gone. And you saw that I did enjoy the battle for silver and bronze with the Belgian and the athlete from the Netherlands, Bashir Abdi. That was kind of fun. And I think that Kipchoge just, added to his greatest, Olympic athlete, greatest of all time. I was comforted that the announcers didn't spend a lot of time talking about him being the first sub 2-hour marathoner, because while I do think that was a very entertaining TV program, we're about competition. Our sport's about that. And that was one of the things that came through, that every jump, every throw, every run was terribly competitive on every level. The men and women's 10,000s, I found a picture of after the finish, Safan Hassan was sitting down and they were putting ice packs around her to cool her down a little bit. And that in third place, Atanzabet Gide was just dejected. I think she thought she could beat her. I did enjoy the men and women, the men's 10 immensely. Thought that was a lot of fun. And it's nice seeing a group of nations winning medals too, we can't miss talking about Soufiane El Bakkali, the Moroccan, in the steeplechase. What a great thing there. But the one I think that we need to give, there were several lessons in the women's 400 hurdles. Delilah Muhammad and Sydney McLaughlin the entire time gave credit to the other for helping them pull out. It's also I think there is a uniquely different way that women look at competition than men.
Yeah.
And I think that Sydney and Delilah brought that out. I also thought Femke Bol, the young woman from the Netherlands, oh my gosh, what a talent. And probably the finest relay team I've ever seen the U.S. put together was the women's 4x4. That was pretty phenomenal.
But particularly as arguably none of them is a 400 meters flat specialist. Alison Felix 200, Ating Mu 800, and the other two hurdlers.
No, it was.
I would like to mention 4 people who haven't quite got into our Oscars.
Sure.
First of all, Faith Kipyegon, defending her Olympic title.
Wow.
Winning the world title in 2017, then having a baby, running a national record in 2019, becoming second. Then I would mention, we mentioned Sifan Hassan, simply for her workload, to run heats and final of the 5 and win it, win the 10, then win heat, semi-final and final of the 1500. I mean, frankly, I was disappointed not to see her in the Dutch 4x4 squad. I mean, she was free that day. I mean, just to have the ability to run all those races. And then I'd like to mention Francine Niyonsaba, who is one of these athletes, controversially in my opinion, banned from running the 800, where she's been very successful. And so she ran in the 10K and came 4th. And she ran in the 5K and qualified for the final, only to be disqualified, and not at all clear what. It's one of these situations where, in the midst of a crowd of athletes, she steps into the infield. And, I just think a little bit of common sense. Did she gain an advantage? Did this mean? Are they really saying that she wouldn't have qualified for the final if she hadn't done that? I don't think so. I think that was very disappointing. And then also, the women's long jump was phenomenally exciting, with Mahambo of Germany winning, Brittany Reese second, and Esibruma of Nigeria. In the last two rounds, we saw the lead change place twice, and just a phenomenally exciting competition. And the old saying about when the tough gets going, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And Mahamba, who hadn't jumped particularly well, produces the 7-meter jump, just what she needed it to win the competition.
Yeah, I thought it was fabulous. I mean, it was each event. There was, and I was lucky enough to be able to watch every final and all the heats. There was 55 hours of track and field on TV, and I watched all 55. It's not like being there. I missed what I will tell you is I hate how they put the commercials in, because they were putting them in at the moments when something was really happening. They'd bring us back, but oh my gosh, it was terrible. And people were just going crazy. And then over here, the biggest issue was NBC Sports was bemoaning the fact that the number of fans were down. I believe they're completely wrong. They're the reason why the numbers are down on TV. We didn't know which place to go. And, I'm supposed to be a journalist, and every night we're watching the NBC or CBC broadcast. I don't think we even watched the NBC broadcast, even though we bought a cable package. We saw NBC Sports, and then in the mornings we watched Peacock, and we had several of the British announcers. We had Tim Hutchings for a few days, and then Tim went away. So not sure, and people were confused. And in fact, the men's semifinal, the 1500s on the East Coast of the U.S., was, instead of seeing the first semifinal, they were watching WWW Professional Wrestling, WWF, and they finally were able to get it corrected so everybody could watch Matt Centrowitz in the semi, But it was, there were some things like that. The U.S. announcers were quite good. They had an Australian heading it up, this Lee Denny, who I think did a pretty good job and did his homework. But I also think it's not the BBC announcers, and I'll be able to watch that on YouTube over the next few weeks and see how everything went.
There's been criticism of BBC, and a lot of people were saying Eurosport was better.
That's what I heard too. I heard a lot of people watching Eurosport this time. So it's just it's going to be very interesting. Well, my friend, it's time for you to relax and maybe enjoy your evening. And thank you again for taking the time. And I'm so happy you got to meet your new granddaughter. But this is Athletics Chat number 63. We will be back the same bat time and same bat channel next week. We have Stuart Weir back in the intellectual capital of the world, where he should be, Oxford, England. I'm in Fort Atkinson for a while still. And thank you again for watching Athletics Chat 63. Thanks to Mike Deering, our production manager, who puts up with us and our Wi-Fi and, our sense of humors, our dated sense of humors. Have a great evening. Thanks, Stuart. Well, hello, sports fans. Larry Eater, Run Blog Run. This is Athletics Chat number 63. Our friend Stuart Weir is back from Tokyo. I got to see his new grandbaby tonight, Lexi, granddaughter. And so we are a little bit later in the evening, but we had some fun today. We talked about the greatest and the biggest surprises and kind of fun stuff. Some themes, the moment in the men's high jump with Gianberto Tambieri and Mutaz Barshim, I thought was, or Stuart thought was probably the biggest performance, biggest moment for him, as was the Italians just winning so many things, which was fantastic. And we also talked about the biggest surprise being Marcel Jacobs, the young man with an Italian mom, and his dad's an American serviceman, but he's really Italian. He was raised there. He said in a quote that while his muscles may be American, he's Italian. And, he played basketball and soccer as a kid, got into the sprints, then got into the long jump. He's had a couple good long jumps, but since 16, he's been doing the 60 and the 100. And, there were a couple articles I read suggesting that he was involved with some whack job nutritionist and some other stuff. The guy's been around for a while. He's performed well on a big stage, especially in 219 and 220. Not a lot of big stages. He's gone 999, and then he had a 995, and then he ran 994, 984, and 980. And he looked within himself. I watched him at the European Indoors in Torun, stayed up at 4 o'clock in the morning to watch that one. Fantastic event. So I think, he is our biggest surprise. The both world records in the 400 hurdles were fantastic. The world record in the shot put, which we didn't even, mention, Ryan Krauser makes it look so mundane, but the thing is, Ryan is at the top of his form. He is the Sergei Bubka of the shot put. He is the kind of guy who could just take it 1 centimeter at a time and break the record, but he doesn't. He's enthusiastic. He loves his event, and you see that. He's like a great painter, and we're very lucky to be able to see his creations. So, on that one a little bit. The thing that Stuart wanted to try to get to me as well was we've been to hot events. Doha was terribly hot. Beijing both times in 08 in 15, to the point that in both times in Beijing they salted the clouds so that we could have a little bit of rain in the evening and cool stuff down, because the humidity was almost life-threatening. Osaka was probably the most humid place I've ever been. It makes St. Louis seem, moderate. But from what I understand, Tokyo may have beat them all. Sapporo, with 30 of the elite marathoners, the finest marathoners in the world, dropping out, including Lelisa de Sisa. That tells you something. I also think that it was also nice to see Abdi Abdirahman in his 5th Olympics with, a few niggles, compete well. And Jacob Riley did too, as did Galen Rupp. So we had a nice team. But Molly Seidel on the women's side, wow, fantastic. Just a fantastic performance. And that she's from Wisconsin. And, we had Mo Ahmed from Wisconsin, and we had a few others from Wisconsin. All good things. But we needed the Summer Olympics. It was sad that fans could not be there. I have to take hats off to the LOC, the health officials, World Athletics, and the IOC. There was some luck involved, but also they did a great job. And they did keep people isolated, and it was rather difficult for the media and rather challenging for the athletes as well. But it's something they'll never forget. And that's what our Olympics is all about. I hope to see you in Paris in 2024, which will be my 10th visit to the Olympics. And it's, I hope that all of our different pandemic things will be under control by then, but I sense that we're going to be dealing with some of these things for a long time in the future. So you need to stay safe. You need to know that there may be some events that we can go to, and there may be some we're not going to be able to go to, and we're just going to have to deal with it. But the human spirit overcomes many, many things. The theme that comes across before I finish, and I want to leave you with this, and this is what I'll be writing about this week. I'm going to be doing a deep thoughts on each day, is that consider the events in the finals and how many athletes have had challenges getting there. It's part of our human condition. And what the Olympic ideal is about is rising above those challenges and being classy and being respectful of your competition. It was something that I learned from Father Passarelli and Brother Jim Marheineke and Rich Brower and, Steve Pensinger and Jesse Ochoa at Bellarmine and Rocket Ray Devlin and Dan Durante at Santa Clara. I was very fortunate to have great coaches, but also coaches who knew that there was more to it than just the competition. And the Olympics, as Baron Pierre de Coubertin tried to tell us, is about that, and it continues to grow. More and more opportunities for young athletes, more and more opportunities for women. I think one of the stories that we will be looking at over the next several months is how great an Olympics this was for women's sports. It was huge. But think about that. It's about 103 degrees here in Wisconsin. I need to get in some air conditioning. So have a great afternoon. Stay safe, hydrate. Thanks again to Mike Deering, our program director. He keeps us laughing. He keeps us kind of on target. He keeps me kind of focused, which is really difficult to do, let me tell you. But it's all about you guys enjoying Athletics Chat. Stuart and I really enjoy doing it. The idea came from Michael and Adam John Sr., my son, and most appreciative of giving me something to do every Monday. Stay safe. Talk to you soon.